Okay. Tonight we are here with our friend Mpumelelo. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
It has been a long day.
Yes, I know for you, yeah, it's been a marathon since morning up to this time.
Yes, yeah, you saw me no, in the morning. Going with
Yeah,
the face. So, yeah, but
yeah, I can
I'm
imagine.
fine. I
I can,
recover.
yes, I joined you in the morning, and of
Yes.
course, on my side, it was in the afternoon. Then I went to sleep, and I had to wake up. It's in the morning of the 4th now.
Wow.
It's 2 a.m. in the
Yeah, you
morning.
too, no? It's 2 a.m. for you?
Yes, it's 2 a.m.
Oh, sorry.
That's
But once per
fine.
year, once per year. It's only one.
Yes. Mm.
Okay, Marvin, thank you so much uh, for, for being here. Well, um, our friend Mpumelelo Ncube is serving as the academic head of the department and associate professor at the Department of Social Work, University of the Free State, South Africa, with extensive academic and practical experience. He had a contribution to social work and education, earning a reputation for excellence. Previously at the University of Johannesburg, he served as a senior lecturer in the Department of Social Work and Community Development before transitioning to academia in 2013. He gained valuable experience as an employee wellness specialist in the corporate sector, focusing on promoting employee well-being. Drawing on his passion for effecting positive change, he has worked as a psychosocial service manager in the non-governmental sector NGO, deepening, deepening my deepening his understanding of challenges faced by vulnerable individuals and communities and developing effective support strategies. His social work career began as a statutory social worker in the government sector, providing insight into social welfare systems and governmental frameworks. Complementing his practical experience, he holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of Johannesburg and Master in Social Development and a Bachelor in Social Work from the University of Witwatersrand, reflecting his dedication to advancing knowledge and professional development. He specialized in development social welfare, developmental social work, decoloniality, and social work supervision and management. Evident in his research contribution and his role in educating the next generation. Okay, Malelo, you could present your work. Is
Okay.
uh,
Highly appreciated. Thank you very much for that introduction. I just want to make sure that I'm able to share here. If you can give me the right to share so that I can share.
yes.
It says a host disabled participant screen sharing, so it means I can't share from my side.
No, yeah, it's about let's see again.
Oh, yes, okay. All right, you can see it from your side, eh?
Yes, very good.
Just want to go to slideshow. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present in this conference, a wonderful conference. It is a good thing really to be engaged with colleagues from across the globe. As I indicated that I joined you in the morning, it was in the morning on your side, around about 2 p.m. on our side, Central African time, because I'm in South Africa. And now I'm presenting to you is 2 a.m. the following day, which is the 4th, while it is still the 3rd on your side. These are the joys of being, with colleagues from across the globe. It's highly appreciated. I trust that you'll enjoy the presentation, everybody listening at any given point in time. They'll enjoy, but also learn one or two things from what I'm presenting. As indicated, I'm from the University of the Free State, and I'm an academic head of department here at the University of the Free State. I joined the University of the Free State from Johannesburg University, the University of Johannesburg, in April of 2021, and I've been here since then, and I'm enjoying and loving the city. Staying here for the first time since I came here. It's central of South Africa. It's a central province in South Africa. It's in the heartland of South Africa. It's landlocked, and of course, nearby you've got Lesotho, which is not too far from us. I think it's about 1 hour, 30-minute drive. Then you'll be in Lesotho, which is another country here, a country within a country in South Africa here. All right, I'm presenting to you here looking at my topic, which says reclaiming indigenous knowledge, and talking about translating social work terminologies through a decolonial lens. Now, this is one area of my interest, research interest. As you indicated, I focus mainly on social work supervision. I also focus on decolonization, decoloniality. It is my other area of interest. But the two areas of interest, social work management and supervision, social development and decoloniality, they actually merge. There's a nexus between these areas of interest. So there's a very nice confluence of these areas of interest on my side. So my focus today, I'm actually looking at decolonizing social work education, but the presentation stems from the exercise that we've undertaken here is the Department of Social Work, where we are looking at the terminologies and to translate the terminologies of social work. We are predominantly an English-speaking university, but that being the case, our student population, they are largely, Sesotho speakers or Xhosa speakers, isiZulu speakers. So these are indigenous languages within South Africa. So it is then of importance that we see to it that the kind of language or the medium of instruction, while the medium of instruction at the moment remains English, but we see to it that we make the material accessible in the languages of our students, in their indigenous native languages, and if you may want to put it in that way. So my presentation outline, of course, I do have this short introduction that will be followed by the background to the study, which is briefly what I've just given now, but I'll add a bit to it. Then the linguistic colonial legacy in social work, which is what I'm going to also highlight in this regard, because it actually is the basis for the exercise that we're taking as the Department of Social Work here at the University of the Free State. Then we look at the process of terminology translation, the process that we've undertaken as the department to translate the terminologies of social work into native languages here at the department. Then we also look at some key terms. I had to choose just a few terms to highlight what I'm talking about when we're talking about terminology translation, the terms that we've translated. Then I'll conclude my discussion in that way. As a way of introduction, we're looking at the history of social work in South Africa, which has a huge Anglo-American influence. Earlier on, when we opened the conference, I listened to Professor John Rothenberg, who's my colleague here in South Africa, at the University of Zululand, and he was speaking about clinical social work, presenting to you about clinical social work and what clinical social work is and how it should be understood. And in that, he also highlighted the huge Anglo-American influence in our social work education as well as social work practice, if you want to understand in that way. So here again, I am also bringing that angle that we are so Anglo-American influenced because of our colonial and apartheid history. You know, our colonial history stems from the 17th century. You remember, if you know the history of South Africa, 1652 being the time where you know, Jan van Riebeeck landed in the Cape of Good Hope, and everything else then became history out of that. Then, you know, as South Africa became, you know, a colony, as it were, first beginning with the Dutch and later on, you know, the English people taking over, until, you know, that transition in 1948. Where the National Party took over, then the institutionalization of apartheid, you know, separate development, institutionalization of racism actually it took place in South Africa. So South Africa has been, you know, influenced by that kind of history. Even as we speak now, we are sitting here 30 years into democracy, versus the whole, you know, decades and decades of, you know, colonialism and apartheid, as it were. So now we are 30 years into democracy. So much has been done, but so much more still needs to be done. So it shouldn't be any wonder why we're still referring to or looking at the legacy of the influence of colonialism and apartheid in everything that we do, in all spheres of our life here in South Africa, in everything that we do, including social work, education, and practice. So when we talk of social work education, it also, you know, stemmed from that kind of background. You know, when social work education began, you know, it started in predominantly white institutions, and those being the Cape Town University, which is in the Western Cape province of South Africa. It started in 1924, and of course, thereafter it was the University of Pretoria in 1931. That started teaching also social work education. And later on, it was the University of Stellenbosch. And of course, all the other universities came gradually thereafter. Then, of course, all this was characterized by separate education. You know, separate education meaning that, you know, white students will be taught alone, black students will also be taught alone in different institutions. So these institutions that I'm highlighting here were predominantly white universities, largely driven by the element of racism, as I've indicated, you know, with that colonial and apartheid history. So this paper looks briefly at the legacy of colonialism and apartheid on social work education, and social work practice. It continues to reflect on the methodology of terminology translation that we've undertaken now as Department of Social Work to try and ensure that, you know, we accommodate. It shouldn't even be an issue of accommodating. It should be an issue of ensuring that we center the lives and the experiences of our indigenous students, of our students, because the vast majority of our students are native Black students who speak Sesotho, being the predominant language in this particular province where my university, the University of the Free State, is located. So it also includes highlighting a few selected terms of interest that were translated. And we undertook this exercise of translating, you know, that was a week ago, where actually the entire team sat down and engaged in this process of translating. But of course, it was groundwork, preparatory work before the contact session that we had in the translation of these terminologies. So the University of the Free State established a center of multilingualism, and its main function is the establishment of linguistic parity, given the prevailing colonial legacy in this front, as I've just indicated to you, the colonial legacy that still prevails, not only at the University of the Free State, but across South Africa and all spheres of the society. One of its priorities, the priorities here of this department, or the Center for Multilingualism, has been the partnership with academic departments in the university to translate key terms to Sesotho, which is, as I indicated, a predominant language in the province and by extension in the university. So social work, like most disciplines in the university, is taught in English. And as such, the terminologies of discipline also needed the translation. So it is for this reason why we embarked as the department, we embarked in this process of ensuring that we translate terms of social work. And you'll see later on where I indicate that we translated in a week, we translated about 750 words, terminologies of social work, and it cuts across your clinical social work and different other areas of social work, different other areas of specialization in social work. So we're looking at all the terms from all those different areas of specialization. We're also looking at all different levels, looking at your macro, your meso, and your macro practice in social work. So social work as a profession was introduced during the colonial times, in South Africa, heavily influenced by British and American models of social welfare and social work education. And of course, the early social work training program in South Africa were modeled, as John indicated earlier on, after the British and American systems, emphasizing charitable work and casework in that regard. And of course, when you get to look at the curriculum pedagogy, teaching and training, we say, although we are beginning to make significant changes, as I indicated, 30 years into democracy, quite a lot of work has been done in trying to turn the tide to be in favor of the majority of South Africans. But of course, the university, the university will also have students from different races, white race, Indian race, and that's the case across all universities, in fact. But of course, we're saying the majority of our students are Black African students who speak indigenous languages in that regard. So turning the tide to ensure that these students are put into the center of education and training is of utmost importance to us. So social work education remains largely based on European and American theories and practices focusing on individual and remedial interventions. And of course, European social work theories such as psychodynamic and functionalist theories were and are still prominent in the training of social workers in this regard. So with this background, the hegemony of English as a medium of instruction remains largely, should I say, unchallenged. So it is important that we try and ensure, as I indicated earlier on, that we bring about parity insofar as the language, the use of language is concerned. I'll touch base on why it is important for us to do this. This is despite the fact that all the students of social work, of course, the hegemony of English is despite the fact that all students of social work, in the case of UFS, have English as either third or fourth language. So you can see that there's a vast difference. If you are using a language as your fourth language, you know that sometimes your mastery of that language is not that good. So it is important then that you are brought up to speed to ensure that you understand the content that you are being taught, that you are being trained in. So, but for you to understand, you have to have mastery of language, and of course, the language of instruction, the medium of instruction, is of utmost importance. It is for this reason that we embarked in this process of terminology translation. So here we also look at, I want to look at Ngugi wa Thiong's Decolonizing the Mind framework. So it was important to say, if we are to look at language, whose framework do we use, or which framework do we use? And in this case, we used Ngugi wa Thiong's Decolonizing the Mind, and we used quite key themes in that body of work, in his body of work, looking at decolonizing the mind. And the key themes in that regard look at language as a culture, psychological liberation, empowerment through language, and of course, encountering cultural imperialism. And of course, when you're looking at this, and I want to acknowledge that although Ngugi wa Thiong's primary focus is on literature and cultural production, his ideas provide a robust framework for addressing language issues in social work. So we thought it was important that we actually import and adapt our, orientation or, our work of language translation or terminology translation along the framework that he provided. So we look at firstly language as a culture. Why is it important that we focus on language? We hear Ngugi advances language as a culture, where he says it is a canon of culture. Language is a canon of culture and identity that helps to preserve and promote heritage and ensure that knowledge and cultural practices are passed down through generations. So in the absence of language, unfortunately, which is a vehicle through which you can pass knowledge from generation to generation. Unfortunately, without language, you cannot do that. It is important that language becomes the medium of transmission of whatever, be it the culture and knowledge to the next generation. Even if you were to have language, but you do not have mastery of that language, that becomes a huge concern. So that's why it is important that to say, if you've got language, ensure that you've got good mastery of it so that you'll be able to make use of it in the best way possible so that you transmit this language or you transmit knowledge as well as culture to the next generations. So we thought it is important for us, if you are to transmit knowledge in social work to the next generation of social workers, the language is at the center of it. So we have to pay attention to the language that is being used. Of course, the second one being the psychological liberation. When we talk about psychological liberation, Ngugi also advances this thesis that says moving from colonial languages towards indigenous languages gives an individual psychological liberation. And of course, communities, the same to communities as well, by validating their cultural experiences and perspectives. So you give someone, if you use a language that they've got mastery of it, you are actually liberating them psychologically. There is nothing as refreshing as being an individual who's psychologically liberated. And quite a lot of people walk around, and when they lack that psychological emancipation, they're like zombies. And in everything that they do, they're like just like zombies. They do not have a sense of the self. They don't feel themselves. They don't identify with themselves. They don't identify with themselves. They don't identify with the work that they are doing. So you want to give somebody the psychological liberation, and you can do that. And we are advancing this argument that you can do that by ensuring that you use language in the language that they understand best and the language that they can communicate in best. And by so doing, you'll be giving them that psychological liberation. And we want to do the same to our students. We want to give them that psychological liberation, and as we train them to be the future generations of social work. Thirdly, Ngugi advances, that language is an empowerment tool, is a tool of empowerment. When it talks about empowerment through language, you empower your students, you empower the communities through language. This is what we are advancing as well here at the University of the Free State. So Ngugi says native languages empower, the communities and students by giving them the linguistic tools to express their realities and challenges in their terms. Like I said, it is so emancipatory to ensure that, one, you give somebody the language, the tool, the language as a tool to ensure that they express their own realities. If you do not give them the language, the proper language, unfortunately, they will struggle expressing themselves in those kind of languages. And we experience this in our own classes when we are teaching. Those students who do not have mastery of language, they tend to keep quiet until you engage them in their languages. And as they keep quiet, it's not as if they don't understand you. They do understand you, but for them to respond becomes a mammoth task because they don't have the mastery of this language. It becomes a huge, huge task. So we are saying we need to liberate them. So we cannot continue in a situation where we are teaching students, but they find it difficult to engage with us because we are using a language that is foreign to them. Although they understand it, but it is foreign to them. They understand it, then they can communicate, but in order for them to freely communicate, particularly their realities, into their experiences, their lived experiences, ensure that you emancipate them in that way by giving them, doing so in their languages. The fourth, the dimension, as Ngugi has it, is countering cultural imperialism, where he says prioritizing indigenous languages enables students and communities to resist the cultural imperialism, and as social work educators, we cannot be part and parcel of, what is, as Ngugi puts it here, cultural imperialism, particularly because we've got the duty to ensure that we free our students and the communities that are serviced by our students and our students, or even after graduation, the communities that are serviced by our postgraduates, we free them from these shackles of colonialism that keep binding them, and they continue even to this day to bind them. Unfortunately, they are unable to freely express themselves or experience the life as they should because of these shackles of imperialism. But of course, and shackles of colonialism. But of course, we cannot be part to cultural imperialism, as it were. So we are saying, let us ensure that we emancipate our students by teaching them in the languages, or at least affording them the space to use their own languages, while we march forward to a space where eventually even the medium of communication or the medium of instruction in our education is in the language that is used by our students in that regard. In this slide now, I then look at the importance of language in teaching and learning, which is basically what I've just touched on here. So I'm adding on what I've just highlighted on, the framework that we used as given to us by Ngugi Watio. So now I'm highlighting some of the critical aspects of using of language in teaching and learning. So where here I advance that language is the primary tool used by educators to deliver content, explain concepts, and facilitate discussions. So that's why it is important that we give focus, we pay attention to language in social work education, whether you are doing it in clinical social work, in developmental social work, or in other areas, other aspects, community development and so forth. It is important that you pay attention to language. The clarity and effectiveness of instruction largely depend on the language skills of both the teachers and the students. So if we as teachers don't have full mastery of the language, it becomes an impediment. But it gets even worse if the students do not lack the necessary language skills, to be able to converse, to write, and express themselves in that regard. So that's why I'm saying here the clarity and effectiveness of instruction largely depend on the language skills, and for both teachers and students. So even if teachers have got, in this case, our educators have got mastery in language, but if we are teaching a group of students who lack these skills, it becomes problematic. So again, at this level, at the university level, we are not about teaching somebody language, the mastery of language, but we are about teaching the content. It is important that we focus on the content, we focus on the skills, the practice skills and so forth. So now the minute you find yourself having to focus mainly on teaching a student at the university level, teaching them language, then you are taking so much of the time that is meant to teach them, the skills and the rest of the content of the module or of the program, as it were. So language is closely linked to cognitive development, right? So if one lacks the mastery of language, unfortunately, you are inhibiting their cognitive development in that regard. So it is important that as social work educators, we are mindful of that. So it's a subject that we cannot just brush to the side or just, give flimsy attention to. It is important that we give full attention and ensure that, we address all the challenges that come with issues of language and medium of instruction. So it helps students to process and internalize from information, develop critical thinking skills, and articulate their thoughts, as I've indicated. You cannot develop critical thinking skills in a language that you do not understand. It is important. It is impossible. So while you can understand language and you are able to, for formal purposes, you are able to, engage, do one or two things. But when it comes to critical thinking, you need to have mastery of that particular language. And a strong command of language enhances students' ability to understand complex ideas and engage in higher order thinking, leading to innovation. And that is one issue that we always say, and we always, talk about, even in my department, where we say, in Africa, in most cases, we lack, innovation. We are not that innovative. And at one point, I wrote even a paper arguing that, the one reason why in Africa we failed to even come up with the, vaccines of COVID-19, it was because largely we are not using our indigenous languages to think and do things that we need to do at a critical level, at that deep-seated level. We can't do that because we are teaching our students, or we were taught in this one language, which is English, but on our daily lives, we are using different languages, be it Zulu, Xhosa, all the different native languages, Sesotho, and so forth and so on. Now, when it comes to innovation, you find that all these things in most cases have to happen where now one has to shift, move from your language to the next language, which is English, to begin to think and say and know what needs to be done. And in that regard, you can hardly, string any ideas together to come up with new innovations. Yet, on the other hand, look at the countries that came up with the vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines. All those countries, all of them, they are using their native languages. They are using their mother tongue languages. You can look at UK, they are using English. You look at France, they are using their French. You look at India, they are using their language. You look at Germany, and all the different, you look at Russia, China. These are all the countries that came up with vaccines. They are using their own languages. So we are saying we cannot manage to be part and parcel of perpetuating this unjust system where our students are always, would be unable to be innovative in that regard. Yet Africa needs innovation. We need to be innovative. And we need to gravitate towards a situation where we empower our students to be able to do that. And one way of doing that is to ensure that we give them the necessary language skills, and that can be done by allowing them to use their own languages. So we are trying to do that by translating the social work terminologies into the native language, Sesotho in this case. So now I want to look at the process of terminology transmission that we embarked on here at the University of the Free State. So of course, driven by or led by the Multilingual Center for Multilingualism, as I indicated earlier on, in collaboration with different academic disciplines at different times. So in social work, more than 750 English terms, as I indicated, were translated to Sesotho, a predominant indigenous language in the province in which the university is located, Sesotho, as I highlighted earlier on. The translating team included a lexicographer, Sesotho language experts, social work, and of course, social work educators in that regard. So Sesotho language experts, these are, individuals from within the community who understand the local language, and they are trained in this, by the way. So it was important that you engage the community in this way. And of course, the lexicographer, these are the people who give meaning to words, as we have different dictionaries in that regard. The exercise entailed, weeks of harvesting social work terms from various sources, particularly those used in the modules taught at the university across all levels. So we tried and we harvested all these terms from all the different modules that we teach in the university, but we also used other terms that are, that are popular in social work. We also harvested those terms to ensure that they are part and parcel of this whole process, right? Attaching profession-specific definitions. It was important that we attach profession-specific definitions as we drew these definitions from various sources, academic sources, as we have them. So that was followed by a week-long period of translating terms and the terms definitions into Sesotho. So we were predominantly preoccupied by translating, translating terms. But there were instances where basically you also needed to attach definitions so that, translation will be easier in that regard. You'll see this when I get to the next slide, where I talk about the principles of translation, what guided us. So we are not yet done. We are still in this process. So the next step will entail a process that involves verification of the accuracy of translations and standardization by the Pan-South African Language Board, which is referred to as the PANSALB in South Africa, which is responsible for issues of language, indigenous languages, all formal languages in South Africa, standardization of all formal languages in South Africa. We were guided by the principles of translation, and these are quite a number of them. So it was important that we've got a clear framework, and of course we abide by principles of translation. And we went through these principles of translation to ensure that what we do is actually up to standard, and can stand even the mastery of any scrutiny if anyone were to look at that process. And as translators were guided by Ncube-Reclaiming's basic principles of language translation, but we also borrowed some principles from other sources as well. But Ncube-Reclaiming was principal in this regard. So the first principle of translation was cultural relevant translation, the appropriateness, where here we're looking at the awareness that translations are to just not just to linguistic accuracy. So as we are translating, it wasn't about just linguistic accuracy, but also cultural relevance was of importance, reflecting the lived experiences and cultural context of the communities these terms or our students serve. Secondly, community involvement, as I indicated that we had Sesotho speakers, the experts in Sesotho. These are individuals from the community. As I indicated that I'm in the province of the Free State. In this province, it is predominantly Sesotho speakers, but also we not too far from us, we've got Lesotho, which is where the Sesotho language also is predominantly spoken. So we had individuals from these backgrounds. So it was important that we include them in this regard to ensure that their voices and perspectives are accurately represented. Thirdly, language preservation, as a principle that we observed, support initiatives that aim to preserve and promote indigenous languages within social work practices. So recognizing their role in maintaining cultural identity and community cohesion. So it is important that as you do translations into a particular language, you preserve language, the originality of language, as opposed to translating, but looking at the quality of translation in line with the details of that particular language. Then thirdly, we had fourthly, we had the accuracy, looking at the accuracy, faithfulness to the source, ensuring that translation accurately reflects the meaning of the original text. That was important. Secondly, the completeness, including all relevant information from the source text without omitting or adding unwarranted context. So as you translate, you look at the definition, the original definition of the term as we have it in our social sources. And then as you translate, you ensure that you capture that as it is without adding unwarranted content in that regard. Clarity was of importance, to ensure understandability of what is being translated. The translation should be clear and easy to understand for the target audience, and the target audience in this case being our students. Avoid ambiguity in the process, minimizing ambiguity and ensuring that the intended meaning is conveyed precisely as intended. And then, of course, the next one being consistency, being another principle that we observed. Terminology, using consistent terminology throughout the translation to maintain consistency in that regard. So you realize that you'll find certain terms, and as you or even certain words, as you are translating them, you'll find them again. Remember, I said we had 750 words that we're translating. So you'll keep on using, similar words, from one term to another in your interpretation or in your translation. So it is important that the manner in which you use a word in the first instance, it will be sustained until the end. And then, of course, fidelity, looking at literal versus literal translation versus free translation. Here you are balancing a literal translation, word for word translation, and a free translation where you are actually capturing the sense of what is being translated to convey the intended meaning. So we also obeyed, this particular principle. Sometimes it will be literal translation. Sometimes where literal translation word for word was impossible, then we moved to free translation, but capturing the sense for sense kind of translation, meaning in that regard. Respect for original author's intent was of paramount importance in looking at those particular terminologies. Linguistic equivalence, here we looked at two things again. Semantic equivalence, meaning that ensuring that the translated text conveys the same meaning as the original text. And of course, secondly, functional equivalence, achieving the same function or effect in the target language as the original text had in the source language. So these were some of the principles that we had. But of course, we had the ethical considerations that were also observed, the contextual understanding, and then the technical accuracy of our translation. And then lastly, the review and revision, which is, and the last one, which is review and revision, is the last aspect that will be done in this whole process. We are yet to do this because the study or the process is still ongoing. We are not yet done. It is a long process, but at least we have started, and this is where we are. And as I near the end of my presentation, some of the terms that we translated, and here I did not include the Sesotho translations because they are yet to be verified. So I didn't want to put them here because otherwise they might be, they might be misleading because they are yet to be verified. They will go all the way up to pencil, as I indicated earlier on. But these are some of the terms that we translated, looking at issues of homosexuality. Homosexuality as a term, it's a term that we use in one of our modules quite a lot. Diversity in social work. We look at sexuality, domains of social work, reflexive social work, social relief of distress, therapy. And so as I indicated, these are some of the terms out of 750 terms that we translated. And of course, this is the list of some of the sources that we used in compiling this presentation. And of course, as we were looking at our translation, as we embarked in our translation in that regard. So I trust that you've learned one or two things out of this, but the process, as I've said, is by far not over. We are still into this. And out of these, papers will be published so that we document and of course we share our experiences in embarking in this whole process. Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me this opportunity, and of course for listening to the whole presentation that I had to do. I appreciate it. Thank you. I think you are muted.
Okay, thank you so much for me. You even do bibliography, no? And there is a publication of John, no? One book of John, I see.
Oh yes, I also use that as well.
Okay. I didn't know that was a publication. Well, in Peru, we have also dialects, like 48 dialects in 4 in Andean and 44 on the Amazonian. Yeah, and little by little it's getting reducing because there is damage on the lands, and it's a problem, no? Preserving all the of the culture on the linguistic, the language of the indigenous communities. No, and it's a big problem because what we will pass, no, in the future if we don't preserve our cultures.
True. That's true.
Mm.
Yeah, it's important that you're reflecting that it is important, really, as I indicated, that we preserve the cultures, and of course, language being one of those central tools through which we can preserve our cultures, the cultures of people that we serve as social workers, and of course, as social work educators, the cultures of our students that we serve. Thank you, Carolina.
And what would be the role or the function of social workers in this order to preserve, the culture, the dialects?
What would be the role of social workers?
Yeah.
Yes, as social workers, we need to ensure that, look, social justice is paramount in our practice, in our profession. So there cannot be any social justice if you are removing people from their identity. So if you cannot preserve the identity of the people that you serve, then there is no way in which you can be a champion of social justice. So it is important that as social workers, we devise as many avenues as possible, as many interventions as possible, to ensure that we preserve that succinctity of culture and the identities of the people that we serve. So that's the most important thing. So our role is actually that of education, of advocacy, of teaching, as it were. So it's a central one, it's a critical one in that regard.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, it's a beauty stories of our cultures, for in this order to teach since the little ones, that continue with this tradition through the years. Well, Pumi, Pumi.
Yes, Mpumi.
Thank you so much for being here since the morning. And
Highly appreciated. Thank you for the opportunity given to me. I highly appreciate this. Like I indicated, it's now almost 10 to 3 in the morning this side. So, but it was a pleasure for me to really be part of this conference.
to me more.
Yes.
Later, when finish the Congress, I will put the Spanish subtitle for people could understand a little, because
Okay.
not so much
No.
people speak that don't know. People don't speak so much English.
I understand. And
See,
it
but the
actually
good is
speaks
that
to,
is recorded now. We are recording the video,
yeah.
and it will pass for the social networks.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And thank you very much, really, for putting this conference together. It is really, we trust that quite a lot of people learn quite a lot of things, because it's a very diverse themed conference. So quite a lot of people learn quite a lot of things out of this. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Now